I have the pleasure to welcome in our series of podcasts Nadiia Koval, a foreign and security policy analyst currently heading the Department of Research, Analytics and Academic Programs at the Ukrainian Institute, which is the key cultural diplomacy institution of Ukraine. I want to thank you very, very much for having this discussion with me. You are going also to participate in the European seminars in IDRA this year. And we are very happy that you will come to Greece to talk to us about what is actually going on in Ukraine and how you see the future. And I want to begin with that. How are things in Ukraine?
Well, the war is ongoing. Since 2022, we did not have many calm periods, so we still have quite heavy fighting in the east of the country. Like the Russians are currently attacking heavily in Donbas region, on Pokrovsk agglomeration, on Selidovo and other smaller cities. So the fighting is quite intense. We had a prolonged period of shelling with missiles, with ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. So we have quite damaged electricity grids. We have quite a number of civilian infrastructure destroyed. So yesterday we had again some electricity cuts. They haven't been drastic so far, but they have been reintroduced. It was only 3 hours, but earlier in July, for instance, it would be like up to 3 hours a day of electricity only. But nevertheless, so we are still alive, still fighting, still hoping for a brighter future.
Do you think this brighter future? I mean, we hear a lot of voices telling that there should be an end of the war. Actually, but I'm only a journalist. I cannot see that happening as long as Putin is in charge of Russia. But as I said, I'm only a journalist, so I want your point of view. How do you think that this war can end? And my second question is, are you worried if Donald Trump becomes the president of the United States of how this war will go on?
The interesting thing about this war is that it's indeed extremely open-ended. It can end anyway. It could end in Russian victory, provided they do not have enough, if other countries decide not to help enough, or if other countries decide that probably Russians can have something or everything of what they want. It could end in Ukrainian victory. It could end either way. And we are constantly in a state of limbo because, as you know, Russia is a huge country. There is a huge asymmetry of resources, of military power, of financial power. And we, as Ukraine, as a country, we are extremely dependent on our partners and on our allies and on their resolve to help us. So in such a situation, we could only hope that our partners stay with us and they actually assist us to the end of the war and actually want us to win this war and not Russia to win this war. And of course, in this connection, the perspective of electing Donald Trump as the president of the United States for the second time is troubling, is worrying. You know, his nominee for vice president has actually yesterday shown his vision for how this war should end, and this is actually the ending on the war on Russian terms. So according to Vance, Russia should actually keep all the territories that it has occupied so far. Then we should create a demilitarized zone there and make sure that Ukraine does not enter in any Western alliances and so on and so forth. And if such things are spelled out as the position of the campaign, as the position of the perspective vice presidency, yes, of course, it's a problem, and it is worrying, as the United States are a major power in the world that has provided so far the most military assistance to Ukraine, as well as the European Union has provided the biggest amount of financial and humanitarian assistance.
Well, there is this kind of war, the war that is on the field, as I can say. But I want us to tell us what you do in this cultural diplomacy institution, because I think that in this era that matters also a lot to show what Ukraine is. I mean, you have the war, and you have also a kind of diplomacy that may help a lot the perspective and how people view Ukraine and the need to win for all of us, for Europe.
I think this is actually a crucial question. I've been working in this research on cultural diplomacy because I actually had a research unit in my institution. And what is actually crucial is of how other countries, how political elites in other countries, how citizens in other countries, how they view Ukraine as the country, relations between Russia and Ukraine, how they actually, do they know anything about Ukraine, its culture, its history, or they don't? How do they perceive the war? So we had a big study a few years ago, how actually the biggest countries of Western world actually perceive the war and its ending. And this is a very difficult topic because if we look through it, there is so much lack of information, and there is so much information, including in academic, including in think tank circles, that are actually viewed through the Russian lens. And the difficulty is here that Russians actually build a kind of narratives, and they consider these narratives instrumental to promoting their foreign policy agenda. Like my latest study that I have done with colleagues is actually how Russians use culture and cultural instruments to promote their foreign policy aims. If we go closer to this war, you probably could remember that half a year before the invasion, Vladimir Putin decided that he is not only a great leader of the country, but also a great historian. And he basically wrote an article which on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians, and published it. And this was the article about that the Ukrainians actually do not exist. This is the same nations as the Russian, like all Ukrainian history is aberration that should be put to an end. And in half a year, he went on with this program, like annihilating Ukrainian state and its existence, as he deems it, the existence of Ukrainian state is a threat to existence of his country. Like, it seems very weird, like in the 21st century, but this is the kind of thinking which is deeply problematic. So in cultural diplomacy, what is essential to get people to get interest in other country, to make them interested, to have some more genuine knowledge about what is happening here, what people here, what's their history, what's their culture, what do they actually want, and not to look on this country and on this whole region. Like, this is not the problem of Ukraine only. The whole post-Soviet region, post-Soviet republics, and sometimes even the countries beyond that are often viewed through Russian lens and interpreted. And we see it also in political decisions.
Do you have also a network that you can say what Ukraine is and its history? I mean, because one of the huge challenges and problems, of course, are the fake news. And normal people, but even people that are, professors or journalists, often feel victim of this fake news, because it's at the end of the day, in this era, it's very difficult to understand what is fake and what is true. So, do you have a mechanism? Do you have platforms that you can tell, that you can share what Ukraine is? And Ukrainians?
I think it's what we have learned from our experience, and it's not 2022 only, it's since 2014, that it is very, very difficult to combat fake news. Even we did have a number of brilliant fact-checking organizations which exposed and debunked Russian myth about Ukraine war, anything, on a regular basis, but they have seen that this is probably not the ultimate strategy. First, it is reactive, and second, when you even debunk a myth, you contribute to its that it is shared with wider audience still. So it's still a very difficult question, which also puts the question of how Russia also knows to exploit the weaknesses, for instance, of the freedom of the speech, like many of its propaganda networks. And they did work in most Western countries like Russia Today, Sputnik, and so on and so forth before 2022. Like the Crimea hasn't changed much. They just benefited that we have a freedom of speech, and every perspective is worthy of consideration. You can't fight it, because if you fight it too hard, you can destroy the essence of some liberal approaches, the essence of democracy in some countries, and so on and so forth. So probably the fake news debunking, it is important, but it is not the only way to go. So like we can visit, for instance, something like Stop Fake Initiative, but it is very important in a longer term to promote links, to bring, for instance, journalists from other countries to Ukraine, to reorient regional studies in universities, not to research Russia only, and not to rely only on Russian expertise when assessing the situations in other countries of the region, including Ukraine. And it's much more difficult and it's much more lengthy, but I think this is the only way to go to develop this genuine logic, to develop this genuine interest, and only this way we can come to understanding of each other and ourselves in the war. So that's why, for instance, we support since the beginning of the war, we accept journalists, think tankers from many countries. We just give them access, like to go and to see with their own eyes, to ask as many questions as they would like to ask. And then they, not to give them like talking points, what Ukraine would like them to know, but to have their own impressions and to tell their citizens about the war, about the country on their own terms. So it's a difficult way, and this is a long-term way, but to my opinion, it's very important.
If you could tell the biggest fake news that have circulated about Ukraine and about Ukrainians, which were the biggest lies, you think?
The biggest lie is that we do not exist at all. We are non-existent. There is no such idea as Ukrainians. So it's just some spoiled Russians. So there's some Russians with a false consciousness. And so Russians should either re-educate the spoiled Russians or kill those who don't agree that they are actually Russians and should return to the mother Russia. It's the extra fake, the key idea that lies behind of that war. And there are myriads of smaller fakes. In the beginning of the war, there were many fakes about some, I don't know, NATO biolaboratories in Ukraine that create some modified animals that can then spread pandemics. It can be anything. So we are used to this waves of fake news and information campaigns. They go throughout the war and before it also.
And Ms. Koval, how do you see the role of the European Union? Now we will have a new commission. We see the problems also in the EU and in many countries like France, also Germany. Do you see the European Union as a very good friend? Do you see the European Union as someone that, and I talk as an entity because there are different views, of course, inside the European Union, of how much EU can help Ukraine in this war, in this fight against Russia?
Oh, I think the EU actually has a crucial role to play, and it's no coincidence that Russians have attacked on the February 24th and already on February 28th, I guess, in 4 days, we have applied for a full membership in the European Union. And this is an incredibly logical thing, because without that, without getting out of neutrality, getting out of this geopolitical limbo, there is no chance to survive with Russia at our back. And we were very happy that after a very short consideration at least the leaders of the biggest countries, at least the leaders of the biggest European institutions, they actually agreed with us, and it was unprecedented that we had got this European Union candidate status already in June 2020. Because the whole point of this war is for Russian side, like how to better grasp it. Like for Russians, the biggest catastrophe of the 20th century is the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union need to come back for Russia to be a credible source of power in the international scene. So they want to regain what they have lost after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in power, in status, in territory, in population, in culture, in everything. So the problem here, and this period that we had, the 30 years, a bit less than 30 years, when we had this kind of gray zone between the European Union and the countries that were flocking to Russia, like their own Eurasian Economic Union, like it is over. And there is a number of countries that would actually like to say goodbye to Russia forever, and Russia wouldn't like them to do so, and is as happy as to destroy everyone on this way. So for us, telling that no way, we are not, we do not want to, actually do not want to die and disappear from the map and from the world. And we see our future not with Russia, we see it in the European Union, and the European Union should become stronger and more better positioned in the international affairs, in the regional setting after that. This is absolutely crucial to us, and the help that we have so far obtained from the European Union is absolutely fantastic. There is so much more that can be done, but already this solidarity that we have experienced, this help that we have obtained, it's extremely difficult considering the unanimity and deciding in foreign relations, in enlargement, so on and so forth. But we had that consensus, and it had been formidable. And I think again that European Union has to play a crucial role. Even if militarily it helps less than United States, politically it's the most important player.
I thank you very much for this discussion. You draw for us a very clear picture about what is going on in Ukraine and how you see the future. I thank you so very much.
Thank you.